Going live, Bball Report, talking about the recently completed Toronto Raptors Sacramento Kings preseason game in Vancouver. And thank you, crowd in Vancouver, for keeping that game exciting to watch despite the plus 20 turnovers from the Kings and the almost countless number of fouls. It was fun. And I blame the crowd for keeping me excited because they didn't let up for a minute. Right to the end, they were into this game, and it makes a difference. I remember I went to Montreal to watch them play there a couple of years ago, and the crowd there made preseason game against the Knicks exciting. One obvious thing right from the start, DeMar DeRozan, 21 points, 21 minutes. As we were talking about just before the broadcast, he looked like the one guy in the court who's been playing some serious ball this summer and knew what he was doing. Valanciunas didn't look too shabby either. I'm here with James Borbath, formerly of Dino Nation blog, who's here to help me again, and we're going to try and keep this going. We had a lot of fun a few days ago talking about the Raptors season. You can catch that broadcast on YouTube or on the Bball Report site. So, James, what were your thoughts of this very typical NBA preseason game?
Well, it was NBA preseason, and I mean, you have to take everything that happens in NBA preseason with a grain of salt because it is what it is and all of that. I think one of the things that you worry about that we saw late in this game, Terrence Ross went down with an injury. That's the one thing you don't want to see in these games because ultimately they don't mean a heck of a lot. But I agree with you, the fact this was in Vancouver, in front of a crowd that wants to see NBA basketball, that wants to make some kind of point that they still deserve to have NBA basketball, made this a much more enjoyable experience. But at times you got to see some typical preseason fare. And we got to see Rudy Gay be Rudy Gay. I mean, you read that stat line to me before we started. 3 of 11, chucking up the ball. Typical Rudy Gay. It's funny to think about it, but really, when it all comes down to everything, we have Rudy Gay to thank for this Raptor team in this strange sort of way. Because if he was not as brutal as he was last year, we're not talking about the Raptors in the same light we are this year, because he'd still be on this team, and he would have been shooting that 3 and 11 for us and not the Kings. So thank you, Rudy Gay. We appreciate you.
It is really interesting when you see a general manager who's able to figure out that a near star in Rudy Gay, who can give you 20 points a night and did shoot over 50% for the Kings, isn't the same as having 4 people you can put in your rotation who make contributions to your team. There is a difference.
Yeah, people that will actually pass are a wonderful thing in this game of basketball.
That's one of the things Toronto got. One of the things that stood out in this game for me was Greivis Vasquez. Last year, Vasquez he started the season coming off ankle surgery, came to Toronto, still was not in shape, still not really fully recovered. And he didn't really feel he was back to his old self until after All-Star break. Coming in this year, he says he feels great. It's the first training camp he can remember where he's come in healthy. And you watch him in this game, particularly in the second half, running the pick and rolls with Tyler Hansborough. Toronto has a real point guard, a pass-first point guard who's big and physical. And as much as I really liked Jose Calderon as a really nice guy and a guy who's willing to share the ball, Vasquez has something Calderon never showed. Vasquez has swagger that any team that hopes to be successful needs to have. I was really
and people know, anyone who's familiar with my work knows I was not a Jose fan. And the one thing Vasquez has that Jose never did, in my opinion, was at least some semblance of a defensive game, which Calderon never had. But I think what you saw at the end of that game was the Raptors and just the depth that they have. I mean, to have a guy like Vasquez and Tyler Hansborough and Lou Williams, who had a great fourth quarter, that's why Lou Williams is here. he did exactly what the Raptors hoped that he can do in that fourth quarter. Now, is he going to get as many minutes in a real game? Probably not, but that's the type of scoring punch that they want to see from a Lou Williams coming off the bench in the fourth quarter. It just showed the depth that this team has. And, a guy I talked about in that first Google Hangout I thought had a nice night too, with Jordan Hamilton. That said, so did one of the guys he's competing with for a spot in this team, so probably not a good thing for him sticking around with Toronto. But for guys like that, they're playing not just for a spot with Toronto, but a spot in this league in general, and a good night for Jordan Hamilton.
Yeah, and on the depth issue, that was one of the things that really stood out for me from the summer. In past years, Toronto's been able to put together maybe 6, 7, 8 guys who may be able to fight for a playoff spot, but if anyone went down, they were done. This year you look at it and go, well, what if Grievous Vasquez misses 2 weeks? Is there anyone on this roster who can come and play backup point guard and you're going to be pretty happy? And you look at Lou Williams and go, yeah, 9-year veteran who's a no-one scorer, proven guy in the league. I'm pretty happy we got someone that can cover that off. And you go through the lineup and you can see guys like that in every position. The team
Patrick Patterson didn't even play tonight, right? He was out, has some injuries or some banged up stuff. And basically my whole thing in the preseason is if you're not 100%, I don't want to see you on the floor. So I'm totally cool with that. But Patrick Patterson was missing in this lineup and didn't miss him at all because you had contributions from Hansborough and Stiesma and I thought a really great opportunity for Stiesma especially to kind of show he belongs and can be part of this roster.
Yeah, Stiesma did foul out there at the end with 6 personal fouls. And although I don't expect him to ever get to 6 personal fouls in a game because he's not going to play big minutes, he provides that role, that person who's not afraid to foul. And I equate him to an Aaron Gray. But maybe his skill level's a little better. He doesn't have quite the size that Aaron Gray does, but maybe the skill level's a touch up. And as your backup third-string center, Greg Stiesma looks like a real nice pickup for this team. He's someone you're going to have a use for in games. He's going to fill a role.
Yeah, it wasn't all great for the Raptors, though. We still saw DeMarcus Cousins after early going a little bit slow, but DeMarcus Cousins started to be like DeMarcus Cousins, and that's always been a problem for the Raptors. When they face a dominant big man like a Cousins, there's not too many of them in the NBA, but the ones that are there tend to have very good nights against the Toronto Raptors, and Cousins, no exception. The only thing that took him out of this game was the fact he was fouling everybody, which it's the preseason. I think everyone gets a little foul happy, and they have to get used to the refs and all that. So, but DeMarcus Cousins was a problem like he always has been since he's entered the league against the Raptors on the Kings. And, he hasn't always been the greatest player against other teams, but against the Raptors, he's always been a problem.
Yeah, I don't expect Cousins to not average his typical 20 points a game this year again. He's going to be that kind of player. The good part for Toronto was watching Cousins and Anthony Davis go up against Jonas Valanciunas in the World Cup, and both of those guys fouled out. Well, Jonas only had a pair of fouls in the whole game. And again, tonight, Cousins with 5 personal fouls. They weren't all because of Jonas. Cousins just continues to make mistakes that aren't in conjunction with his age. He should be past a lot of these. He should have evolved to the point where he's not picking up fouls at the 3-point line on offense. But
he's one of those guys. He's very thick-headed, and he has yet to find that person that can connect with him as a coach or as an assistant that can get his head screwed on straight. I mean, if that guy ever got his head screwed on straight, he's a top 10 player in this league, no doubt. I mean, that's how good and talented he is. I even think when he came out in Kentucky, that was the year John Wall came out. I think based on pure talent, DeMarcus Cousins was the best player in that draft class. Some may balk at that and say, how could you say that about John Wall? But I'm sorry, DeMarcus Cousins at his best, I'll take him over John Wall any day.
Yeah, the main advantage John Wall has is his head is screwed on right. So
That's
you
true.
get out of him what he has to give.
That's true.
One of the nice things for Toronto is everyone's been very positive comments about Toronto's backcourt, and you look at Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan and how they very easily handled Darren Collison and Ben McLemore, and then you got the other pairing of Grievous Vasquez and Lou Williams. Nik Stauskas, he can shoot the ball, but he cannot defend someone who's got some quicks. And that's, as much as Leo Routens wants to build up our nice young Canadian, who I think has a role in the NBA and will be a good player, his feet are not fast enough to keep up with the quicker two guards in this league. And the Kings, who are lottery bound, have a big defensive hole at the two guard spots.
He's obviously a shooter, and I'm kind of a Michigan fan, so I got to watch him a little more than maybe most would, and that's what he did at Michigan. Michigan always was covering up for him on defense, and they play a lot more zone in college, obviously. So, that's what he is. Basically, he's a redo of what Sacramento thought they were going to get in Jimmer Fredette, and they didn't. And, remember ESPN, how crazy they were about Jimmer? I guess that never worked out. So, Sacramento back to the well again, and I think they get a better version of what they expected to get in Jimmer in Nik, but he's not going to win Defensive Player of the Year. There's no question about that.
No, and he did show straight off, first three shots he took, he made. He's willing to move with the ball under pressure. He's willing to do more than just be a spot-up shooter. He's going to be a nice offensive player. I think his game's going to really grow over the next 3-4 years. Defense is not the area where we're going to be looking for a lot from Nik.
Yeah, and that said, though, if you're Sacramento, you expect Cousins to make up for that, because Dwight Howard used to make up for the ills of a guy like Hedo Turkoglu, who Raptor fans are well aware of. When he played at Orlando, it wasn't as obvious how bad a defender he was because Dwight Howard was there to clean up his messes. I think Sacramento, in their perfect world, envisions Cousins as being able to do the same thing for their shooters and their players defensively. But he's a long way from that because, as we said, he's fouling everybody, so he can't be a help when he's on the bench.
Yeah, one of the players in the Raptors didn't play a lot tonight was Jonas. Got the NBA stats up. He's there up for 17 minutes in this game, but he killed it at the foul line again. One of the nice things we saw through his summer, he's drawing fouls, and we always knew he could make his free throws, but through the summer he made them at an extraordinarily high rate, and that's 8 for 8 tonight. That's something I believe we should be getting used to. We should be looking at Jonas's development this year, not so much being as a guy who's going to get 10 shots a night, but as a guy who should work his way up, at least by the end of the season, as someone who can get to the free throw line 10 times a night. And that's where he's going to get a lot of his points, because he's a big guy. He's got nice movement. When you're moving like that, the tendency for a lot of centers, power forwards, is to foul. And the reason you get away with it on a lot of teams is big men don't make their foul shots. But Jonas is really, he's actually improved from being a decent foul shooter over the summer. I think he's become a very good foul shooter.
Yeah, and if Dwayne Casey can trust him to be in there playing defense at the end of basketball games, that's a huge asset for the Raptors because, as you said, big men don't make foul shots at the rate that Jonas does. He's like, it's just like having a shooting guard or a small forward in there in terms of his foul shot percentage is great. And it's just Dwayne being able to trust him at the end of games playing meaningful minutes, and I think that will come. I think for this whole preseason, though, you got to I'm not worried about DeMar DeRozan playing in the summer. I am worried about Jonas having played in the summer because DeMar DeRozan just seems to have a gas tank that never ends. Jonas, not so much. I think we're probably not going to see a lot of him during the preseason, and I don't think that's anything to necessarily worry about. I think that's actually smart on the part of the Raptors if they keep his minutes really limited and just make sure he's doing the right things in the minutes that he's in there, because I think he's a guy who I could easily see that summer catching up with him quickly. With DeMar DeRozan, I don't think so. But, all the stuff that Jonas has done over the summer, I think the training he's done with his running, you saw a little bit of the work he did with Hakeem Olajuwon on display. It's coming. It's all there, but it's just a matter of managing him and managing his minutes and being very cautious with him. It's what he can give you in the second half of the season more than what he can give you, I think, in October and November for this team in December.
Yeah, the start of the year should be good for Toronto. A relatively easy home schedule until they face Cleveland basically 3 times over 2 weeks, starting at the end of November. They should have a lot of very winnable games. The difference between DeRozan and Valanciunas this summer was DeRozan was a third-string player on Team USA. They put him in to fill in time. If they never really ever did get in trouble, he was just chewing up a few minutes for them. He mentioned that he ran his own workout programs every morning in addition to doing what the team asked of him, because he needed to work on his game. He was not going to get enough minutes to do much in those games. Whereas Jonas was the guy on his team. Jonas was the star.
The point is, though, with DeMar, he can just go for days. Like I mean, that kid has boundless energy, and I mean, we've seen it for years. I don't ever recall looking at DeMar DeRozan and saying, "My God, he's out of gas," because you just don't see that in him, and it's a rare gift. But he has incredible stamina, and he has incredible endurance too. Like, he's a guy who, one of the more durable players in Raptor history as far as stars go. I can't remember a time where he's been out for more than a couple games at a time because he just doesn't get hurt.
No, he stood up very, very well, and that's one of the great unknowns when you draft any player. There's been so many very skilled and high potential guys brought into the league who just their careers ended prematurely or they never reached their potential because of the injuries, the stress of the game. And DeMar stood this up extremely well. He's just proven to be, and we hope this continues, but he's proven to be a guy who just doesn't miss games.
Yeah, he's incredibly durable, and I think him tonight in this game, he just looked like such a polished professional. I mean, you watch the one play where he faked the shot, drew the foul. It all comes so easily to him now, and it's really, it's nice to see. As someone who's been there and watched him from the very start, I was at the camp when he first came on this team in Ottawa, and to see him from that shy young kid to the man that he's become today, you can't help but smile. I mean, does it make me biased? Maybe, but I've always believed in this kid's work ethic, and he's never let me down. And I think it's a credit to him. It's a credit to his family. He's a great, not just a great basketball player, but a great person on top of it, and he's easy to root for.
And I think that's one of the really nice things about the Toronto team, the Toronto roster, is they've become a group that is easy to root for. They are a good bunch of guys to talk to. Tonight was also typical NBA preseason game. Just to give a hint of where we really stood in a 99-94 game that sounds pretty ordinary. Toronto had 31 personal fouls. The Kings had 27. Toronto only turned the ball over 14 times, and a lot of those were in the first half. Whereas the Kings kept up that first half rather embarrassing show and ran theirs up to 27 turnovers by the end of the contest. it's not real basketball. What we're looking for is little things, little hints, little things like, does Grievous and Tyler Hansbrough have that nice give and go on the pick and roll? How does that look? Does it look smooth? Did Lou Williams come through in the fourth quarter like we were hoping he would? Just ignore all the stuff that happened in the first three quarters. He looked like he was full of rust. But everyone's full of rust. That's just the way preseason is.
Yeah, but I think Casey did a good job of, exploring with combinations and trying different things out. And that, at the end of the day, the Raptors did win this preseason game for whatever that's worth. But at the end of the day, the idea is to get ready for the season. It's not about the wins and the losses. We've seen Raptor teams that were 7-1 and 8-0 in the preseason, and then went out and started the season 4-12. It doesn't mean a heck of a lot. It's all about what Dwayne Casey can learn about his roster, and I think he did some nice things. We saw the combination of Stiesma and Hansbrough in there for a while. And I saw some Raptor fans remembering the glorious days of the Banger Brothers with Lonnie Baxter and Archibald. So, I mean, it's combinations like that. It's using guys in situations like Lou Williams. The Raptors got everything they could have hoped for out of this game, other than no matter how minor it was, Terrence Ross getting hurt, you didn't want to see. And Terrence is one of the guys that I think gets the most out of this preseason experience. I think he needs it. Like, he needs to be in there playing, and any time that he misses, I think, is a big deal. If DeMar DeRozan doesn't play another preseason game, I think he would be fine to start up in October. But Terrence Ross is a guy, I think he needs those minutes, and I think this is a kid who, he didn't have a great playoffs, and his confidence, I think, is a little bit shaken, and I don't think that changed a lot tonight. He had good moments, but he had some bad ones too.
Yeah, Terrence has some growing to do as a young guy, but I don't think that was a serious injury. It was more he was stepped on than he did anything in particular, so it's probably nothing much. We have coming up, they play the Kings again on the 7th, 2 days from now. Then they're back in Toronto on the 10th to play the Celtics, and I'll be down at the Air Canada Centre to talk to the boys when they arrive and get some post-game feedback. But over these next couple of games, we'll probably get to see a little bit more of combinations and the rust coming off. And I think Toronto showed they're off to a good start for preseason. Wins and losses don't matter. But like what we saw from the individuals and how some of these guys put together. I'd like to thank James for coming on and help me get this post-game show off the rails and going live. And we're going to try and keep these up. And
we need the Brazilian contingent, though. We didn't get to see them tonight.
I missed Bruno and I missed Bebe. And I understand why they're not in because, well, they're not going to play a whole lot this year from the looks of it. But I really do want to see them in preseason. When else are you going to put them out there when it doesn't matter?
Just for the hair alone, I've got to see that hair out there in the crowd and in airspace. I mean, we've got to see that, Steve. Before the preseason is over, I need to see that.
The highlight of Friday night for me is going to be getting to talk to Bruno and Bebe. Because from what I understand from talking to some of the guys, Bruno's English is now good enough to actually comprehend and give a short answer to an English question. And that's a long way from where he was in July.
So basically by preseason, he'll be speaking better English than Andrea Bargnani. That's what you're telling me.
There's a risk. It could happen.
Well, that's a good thing.
Thanks, James. That's a wrap for tonight. And hopefully we can get a chance to touch base on Tuesday night if this game is broadcast anywhere at all. And we'll try and keep everyone up to date with goings on in the preseason with our Raptors. Thanks.
Yeah, if not, we know the Montreal game will be on, so we'll be back for that at least.
Absolutely. That one for sure.